Hello and welcome back to the dining room table. This is my channel, Mistakes Were Made, which was created to document my family's progress with debt reduction and eventual elimination, budgeting, and all the things in between. Today we are here for our budget with me for July, the first pay period in July. So that means we will be covering the 1st through the 15th. Now I want to say hello and welcome back to those of you who have been following along with our our debt adventure, and welcome to those whose this is their first video of ours. I hope everybody finds something of interest, and if you are on a similar debt journey, maybe something that's helpful that you can take back and implement in your particular situation. But if not, do not worry about that. Everybody's debt journey is going to be individual. All right, so we are going to get started with income. So Mr. M's pay, we already know, actually, let me zoom in so that we can actually see what's going on here. We already know is going to be $1909.01. Now, this is less than the minimum that we kind of were expecting that we would see from his paycheck, which has become a little bit more variable. So that does have some ramifications. Obviously, anything that I have speculated out into the future, I'm going to now adjust because I was putting down $1,920 for the expected minimum pay from him. Now we'll be just doing $1,900 because, of course, we want to make sure that we are underestimating our income anytime we are looking to the future. It's just so that we don't have an expectation that isn't met and then have to figure out a way to come up with money that we don't have. Now, I don't know if we will see his wage or his check drop below $1,900. If it stays, if this ends up being accurate, $1,900 is essentially the lowest that it'll go, then we're all good, because even the plans and things that I have made to determine how much of our budget I need to cover for my income shortfall when the job goes away, or the calculations that we've made to determine, what is the minimum wage I'll be able to accept when I do go to find a new job, have all been based on a minimum of a $1,900 per pay period paycheck for Mr. M. So those calculations don't need to change, just the ones that I've done on a monthly basis, which, if you're familiar with the channel, you know that I like to plan, and I like to plan out, and I have monthly budgets going out until June of 2025. Some of them are based on as if my job never goes away, which we all know is not going to happen, but I have that scenario, and then I have a scenario where we are utilizing the cushion that we have created with the expectation of my job going away this month that we're looking at, July, if it goes away in August, if it goes away in September. So I have a lot of different things out there to kind of gauge, where do we think we should be? But of course, as we get further and further out, those are going to be less and less reliable. But anyway, if it does drop down below, if we have something that comes in below $1,900, then we will create a new minimum and reconfigure all of that other stuff just so that we are as prepared as possible, using the least amount of money coming in as we can reasonably expect. Okay, that was a lot of talking that didn't get us very much further from income. So similarly for me, we are going to use a minimum payment of $2,225. That is what we have kind of determined is going to be the the minimum that I will get on a paycheck. Mine has not come through yet because I get paid twice a month on the 15th and the last day of the month. And we are doing this budget with me prior to the June 16th through 30th pay period being closed out. So today is the 25th, in fact. So we do not know exactly what my pay will be. It hasn't even dropped, into the account just as a pending thing. We also do not know where things are going to end for the June pay period. So some of the numbers will be reflecting that and could be off by a little bit, could be off by a lot. A lot can happen in 5 days. So next is miscellaneous income, which we have no idea if anything's going to come in at this point. Same thing for Etsy. We do not budget any money in for Etsy because we do not want to overestimate our income. The budget rollover, we have no idea what that's going to be exactly, so we're just going to do our minimum of $200. Okay, so now we need to add this up. Let's move this somewhere where I can see everything. We got 1901, 1909.01 plus 2225. I guess I didn't need to put that in there. And 200. So that gives us an income for this pay period of 4334.01. Next are going to be the costs that fall within the first pay period. So these can be X'd out because that is second pay period stuff. And it's basically going to be, for the most part, the same thing as always. The first of 2 mortgage payments, $875 for that. Netflix is $15.49. Kindle Unlimited is $11.99. My car insurance is $114.34. The water bill, we're doing $121. And his car insurance is $204.59. Now, there are some changes that may come to these. As much as I talk about how things don't change too much, guess what? Changes are potentially coming. For my car insurance, it comes due again, renews in July. So this payment amount is expected for this month, but in August, unfortunately, like everything else that's going on around here, we are expecting the cost to go up by about $15 and some change. So starting in August, this cost will be $129.50. Unfortunately, when we did do some, checking into new car insurance and just new insurance in general, the amount that we were getting back from other companies would still be higher, even with the increase that we're going to see here. So at least for right now, I'm going to stick with this particular insurance until and unless we can find something that will be more affordable. The other piece is the water bill. As we know, that is going to a monthly charge instead of an every other month charge. So we're going to need to kind of keep an eye on how much that ends up being over the next couple to few months. And at that point, potentially determine a different minimum or generic amount to put in the event we don't know what the actual cost will be when we're doing our budgeting. This is really probably the best time for that reassessment, simply because we're going into the summer months. So we would presumably be using more water, especially because of the garden, doing the watering outside. So we'll have to kind of wait and see as to whether this number will be going up or even potentially going down. All right, so we are going to add these together. 875 plus 1549 plus 11. Let's start that over. 875 plus 1549 plus 1199 plus 114.34 plus 121 plus 204.59 gives us a total, oh, there we go, so we can see this area, of 1342.41. And we will subtract our income amount from that, which was 43.34.01, and that gives us a total of 29.91.60. Okay, so next we move on to savings. First pay period, so we do not fund our emergency fund. The extra job loss savings, we do not do anything with that at this point. Same thing for the change portion of the buffer. We're just going to calculate the $200. Once we get done with figuring out all of our budget responsibilities and how that impacts the overall income for the pay period, then we can determine if there's any changes that we'll be making here. So total here is $200. And we'll just take this number since it's a negative and add 200 to get our remainder, which is 27.91.16. Next, we've got our cash envelopes, and excuse me, these, for those of you who are new, we do not fund every single one of these every pay period. Some are first half, some are second half, and then there are a handful that we do fund during both pay periods. So we are not doing AAA, we're not doing birthdays. Car maintenance will get $100. Christmas is going to get $12. Clothing does not get anything. Dining out gets $50. And unlike some of these others, which are essentially an unending fund, we'll just continue to fund it. I guess I shouldn't say unending. I think most of the ones like car maintenance or Christmas have a goal in mind, and if we hit that goal, then we'll stop funding until we pull money from it and need to fund again. But dining out and entertainment, along with gas and grocery, are items that get refreshed. So for the dining out and entertainment, this $50 in each one is intended to last the entirety of July. And at the end of July, if there's any money left in there, we will pull that money out and it'll be available to be used for something else, possibly a savings challenge or something like that, maybe to fund one of our longer term goals, just kind of whatever is determined at that point. And then we'll refresh in August with another $50 in each one. Garden yard gets $25. Now gas, similar to grocery, which let's fill both of those in. So gas gets 100. Gifts, I believe, gifts doesn't get anything, and giving gets $5. Grocery is getting $300 this pay period because we fund our groceries based on the Monday, and we have 3 Mondays within the 1st through the 15th. So $300. Next month we'll be back, or next pay period we'll be back to the normal $200. So this is going to be a grocery heavy month of $500 instead of the normal $400. But as I was saying, for gas and groceries, these actually get refreshed each pay period. So similar to dining out and entertainment, there is an end date, and any money that is left over within the time period that it's supposed to fund will then get cycled out, and we will refresh it with another $100, or in the case of groceries, $200, or whatever is appropriate depending on how many Mondays we have to fund. Now the health gets $10, household gets $25, license gets $15, pets doesn't get anything, prime doesn't get anything, and taxes gets $20. So we're going to go ahead and add all this up. 100 plus 12 plus 50 plus 50, oops, not 51, plus 50, there we go, plus 25 plus 100 plus 5 plus 300 plus 10 plus 25 plus 15 plus 20 gets us to $712. And we will get, where were we? Our most recent income amount was $2791.16. So we will subtract $712 from that, which gets us to $2,079.16. Okay, so now we are at debt. And this is exciting because Citibank is done. So, oh, there we go. So we will not be doing any funding for that. Hold on, the dogs are having a fit. Those fools have so many places to lie down, and yet every single one of them wants to lie down in the same exact place just because somebody else is lying down there. So, oy vey. Discover we do not fund during this pay period. Reflect, however, we do, and this is our new debt focus. Now, I wanted to kind of go into a little bit of detail about how we have gotten to where we are regarding the payment portion of the debt. I've watched a few videos out there, and sometimes I don't necessarily follow along with the thought process or some of the things that are being explained. And so I wanted to take an opportunity to make sure kind of the way we're going about it, you know, our thought process, our method is as clear as we can make it. It may already be clear, and this could just be me being paranoid, but I figured it couldn't hurt. So the snowball method, at least in the way that we are applying it, has been incredibly huge for us. We have absolutely reaped the benefits of that process. Now, when we first were getting our debt situation figured out, we didn't do a pure debt snowball application, because that, from what I understand, requires that you pay the absolute minimum payment that each of the credit cards require, and then at the end of, you know, the pay period or whatever, if you have extra money, you can put it towards more debt. But once you have paid off, and the debt that you would put that on would be whichever one is the lowest. And once you paid off that lowest one, then you take the money that you were paying, which is still that minimum payment, and then apply it to the next lowest card. But I think the crux of it is that you're only supposed to be paying the minimums until you're closing out your budget for the month, and then any extra goes towards that lowest debt, if that's possible. And basically that means me. I have a really tough time with just paying the minimums. I just can't do it. I don't like the idea of only paying the minimums. So what we ended up doing was seeing what our minimums would be, and then we determined how much more we felt we could afford to pay within our budget. We did have the flexibility because of our income to make a decision like that. Not everybody is necessarily in that position, but in some cases it might have been $5 more than the minimum, could have been $25, maybe even as much as $75 more than the minimum. I don't think we got quite that high, but bottom line is our first deviation was we didn't just pay the credit card minimum, we created our own minimum. And so in doing that, and we'll put this little piece of paper here, we essentially created a debt budget. And that debt budget, 275, yep, you can still see that, plus 200, plus 150, plus 100, plus 250, plus, wait a minute. I did something wrong, everybody. What did I do? 275 plus 200 plus 150 plus 250 plus 100 plus 250. There we go. Okay. So by determining what minimum amounts we were going to pay on each of the loans that we had when we started this, we came up with a budget of $1,225 for debt. So that's what we allocated in our budget to go towards debt every single month. Now, how we utilize the snowball method is the first step we ended up taking was taking US Bank and Amazon out of the picture, so to speak. We took those two credit cards and consolidated them onto the Reflect card, which ended up being a 0% promo card. These two did have interest previously. And by doing that, because it was going to a 0% card, the minimum requirement for the payment for the card was much lower than the minimum for each of these, and thus, the amount that we were going to dedicate to paying to that ended up dropping. So in this case, we were paying $475 per month to cover both of these. And once the Reflect card came into being, we were able to drop that down to $175. And that still ended up being, I want to say $25, maybe even $50 more than what the actual credit card minimum was. So if you swap that out, that left us with $300 in our already prearranged $1,225 budget to work with. It gave us some flexibility to move money around. Our first main goal that we were focusing on after that point was the Bank of America card. It was another one that's on a 0% promo, so we wanted to get that paid off before the promo ended. So what we ended up doing is we bumped the $150 we were paying by that $300 that we have just created in our actual budget. So this became $450 payments. Again, this did not change how much we were allocating to debt overall. This number did not change. It still ends up being $1,225. We're just rearranging because we created more room by making that balance transfer. Now, a few months later, I don't even think it was a couple months later, we end up having our refund come through for taxes, and that put us in a position where we could pay off both the mom loan and the Bank of America card. So then that means both of these are now out of contention, and so that frees up $250 plus that snowball amount of $450. So you add those together, $450 plus $250. Now we're talking about $700 of debt related money that we can now apply to our next debt target, which ended up being Citi. Citi, we had been paying $100 every month. We now get to add $700 to that, making the total payment $800. And again, we are not going over our $1,225 at this point. If we add that together, $800 plus our Discover, plus our 175 for reflect, we're still within that 1225 that we have budgeted in. So none of these changes that we've made has necessarily affected our overall money in and money out situation. Now, as we all know, during the first pay period of June, just a couple of, like a week ago, we were able to pay City off. And so that then made this $800 available to be redistributed once again. Our newest focus is reflect, so we can add this $800 to the 175, and if we follow the same pattern that we've been doing, we would be paying $975 each month going forward until this card gets paid off. So that's how we have been using the Snowball method to date. Again, none of these moves that we've made as progress has been made has changed the overall cost for reducing our debt to our budget. It has remained at that $1225 total, but we are seeing the impacts of the increase in individual debt payments as we move down the line to our next goals. Of course, the other piece that we are doing that is different than a traditional snowball method is we have not been tackling the lowest debts and then, going higher in order. Our criteria has been, is it on a 0% promo? And if so, we need to tackle them in the order that those promos are going to expire. So that's another little deviation that we did. Okay, so now you kind of know the background. And so at this point, we are going to do another slight teeny tiny deviation, which is going to have an impact on how much we are paying on debt each month, but only by $1. We are going to change this amount to $12.26 per month, simply because we like to divide the payment in half. That $975, that's a big chunk. So if we divide it per pay period, it's a little bit more reasonable. But if you divide that by 2, you get $487.50, and I don't want to have to deal with change. So we're instead going to make this payment, instead of it being $975, we're going to have it be $976. And then that way, we can divide it in half, and it'll just be a nice, even, pretty $488. So not a huge change to our budget. It's just $1, but for my peace of mind, it makes a difference. Okay, so with that in mind, this pay period, we will be paying $488 for the Reflect card. We don't have any other debts that we're going to pay during the first pay period. And of course, similar to the savings, extra savings part, we don't have a number for this just yet. We have to finish the rest of this. So the total here is going to be $488. And now we got to go back to what our previous income remainder was, which was $2,079.16, and subtract the $488 from that, which puts us at $1,591.16. We've got my budgeted guilt-free spending of $30, which we'll just do that real quick, which puts us at $1,561.16 of income left. And then last but not least, we have our long-term goal, $100 per pay period. So we'll just note that here. The actual goal that we are funding is not on the list, so we will just write it in, which is patio chairs. I expect that we will meet the goal that we have set with half of what we will be allotting next pay period. So the goal is only $150. So here we've got our total of 100, and if we subtract 100 from 1561, we get 1461 16. All right. So now we get to the same process that we have been doing thus far, determining how we're going to allocate the income that we still have left over. We have determined and accounted for all of the costs that we have budgeted, and we have some money left over. And what you decide to do with any leftover money, if you have it, is totally up to you. We have a couple of dueling responsibilities or goals. Primarily, we want to get our debt down, but we also have my job loss coming up. So continuing to fund the cushion that we have already created is definitely very important. Now, if we were in a situation where the job loss was not on the table, then absolutely we would, well, I guess I shouldn't say absolutely. We likely would be putting all of this money towards debt, but, you know, we do have these longer term goals. So maybe we would do a similar breakdown that we're doing now for debt and savings, but just do debt and goals or something like that. It's hard to kind of speculate since that's just not the situation that we're living under. But for now, we want to make sure we're dealing with debt and savings. And the ratio that we do is 75% and 25%. Now, if this is a method that you're intrigued about and you want to give a go, you know, these numbers that we're using are not, they're just arbitrary. They're ones that we felt good about. When we talked about how we were going to do the split, we knew we would not make the debt allocation less than the savings, because we had already met our initial savings goal. And so this is just, you know, more padding, and debt really is something that we need to be tackling. So at the very least, we would have done a 50-50, but we could have made the decision to do an 80-20, 90-10, but we felt most comfortable with the 75-25. So it would really depend on what your goals for how you're allocating your leftover income are, what has the highest priority for you, what things you want to try to tackle. You don't need to divide it just between two. Maybe there's three things that you want to try and move forward in. And so maybe you do a, I don't know, excuse me, a 60, 20, and 20. You know, you can make that decision based on what your situation is. So to do the calculation, though, we have 1561.16, 1461.16, sorry, and we're going to subtract 75%, which tells us for savings, we're going to get $365. So now we have two areas we can fill out. We've got the $365 for the extra cushion. We also have the 16 cents, which is going to go on the buffer amount. So our buffer rollover now is showing as $200.16, and the extra savings is $365. So now we're going to go back to our total of $14.61. We can ignore the cents and subtract $365, and then that tells us we will have an additional $1,096 to go towards debt. We are going to continue to do the same process that we did with Citi, and that is indulge my quirk about anything going to our main debt goal will end in either 00, 25, 50, or 75, and then the remainder will go to Discover. And so for this rule to come into play, the closest is going to be $1,075 going to the Reflect card. So let's subtract that. And then that will leave us with $21 for Discover. Okay, so let's just note that up here. Discover is going to get $21, and Reflect will get $1,075. So not too shabby. That's, I think, a pretty good outcome. Any extra we can put towards Reflect, towards our main goal, is fantastic. So this is going to be on top of our snowballed totals. So while our general budget includes the $1,225, as long as I keep my job, we continue to have the opportunities to have extra. Once my job goes away, these opportunities will, as far as I can tell, fall by the wayside. I can't imagine that we will have this kind of money available, because we are only intending to pull out from our cushion enough to meet the current budget. So Mr. M's pay, subtract that from the total overall budget cost for the month, and that will leave what we will be pulling out each month from the cushion, and that will not include amounts like this, because this is all based on the benefits of both his and my current pay at this time. So that said, that's, all is not lost because we won't have these extra payments. We still will have in the budget $1,225 that is going towards debt. It just means that the debt pay down will be slower, and that is what it is. Hopefully I will find a job quickly, and it'll be one that the wage will allow for some extra money at the end of the budget time period, at the end of the pay period, so that we can continue this process, though maybe not with quite as impressive numbers. But we'll just have to kind of wait and see. And obviously, the sooner that I get a job, and start getting pay coming in, the sooner we can then hopefully be able to reallocate our savings cushion that we have built up, and maybe do some bigger wholesale debt pay downs, maybe even payoffs. It's just going to depend on the timing. So anyway, that is the July 1st through 15th first pay period budget with me. I hope it was informative. If you have any feedback, suggestions, ideas, things like that, if you just want to say hi, I absolutely appreciate everybody that has offered encouragement. Note those down below. If you have any questions about, some of the decision making that we've done for our situation, or just in general, or you're unsure, why do you do it this way instead of this way? Note those down below. I have no issues with people asking questions, or if something hasn't been clearly explained or anything like that. First and foremost, this channel is here to keep us honest, to keep us on track, to keep us accountable. But if we can be of help to others that are in a similar situation, or soon will be, or anything like that, then that's just icing on the cake. And we would love to be able to give back, because this community, the budgeting community, was so very helpful when we were completely ill prepared for the shock that my job was going to go away. So on that note, thank you so much. If you have enjoyed watching what you've watched today and you haven't already, please consider subscribing, and we will see you in the next one.